Welcome back. The first ever community-led conservation congress in Africa, known as the Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Conservation Congress, is being held by the Community Leaders Network for Southern Africa in collaboration with the Namibian Association of CBNRM support organizations. The congress brought together community representatives, leaders from Indigenous Peoples organizations, development partners, amongst various stakeholders in the nature of conservation in Africa. To give more details on this, I'm joined via Zoom by the chairperson of the Community Leaders Network of Southern Africa, Dr. Rogers Lubilo, as well as Mr. Malidadi Langa, who is the chairman of the Steering Committee of Alliance for Indigenous People and Local Communities. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Daily Roundup.
Good evening and good evening, viewers.
Good evening, too.
Just to start with, Dr. Rogers, can you provide an overview for us of the Indigenous Peoples and Local Community Conservation Congress and its objectives on the African continent?
Good evening, viewers. Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Conservation Congress is an initiative that has brought together IP LOCs from across the continent. The purpose is to build collective action, to look at the issues and challenges that are affecting the IPLOCs in our countries. So for the SEC Community Leaders Network, which is a regional body for community-based natural resources management programs in Southern Africa, is the host of this event. And we are providing that platform for our people so that they can interact, share experiences across African countries, and then at the end of the conference, we hope to come to a conclusion with an affirmative action going forward.
Mr. Langa?
And what you see here is that the...
Yes, please continue.
Thank you. Yeah, so what I was saying is that during this conference, we have communities, especially I can zero in from Southern Africa. We have all the countries in Southern Africa being represented here by various communities, heads of departments of environment, wildlife from the region, and they are all taking part. We also have traditional leadership from within Namibia and, of course, representation from other countries in Southern Africa and beyond.
Thank you. Mr. Langa, I'd like for you to talk to us about the main challenges that are faced by Indigenous people and local communities in conservation efforts in Africa, and equally, how does the Congress aim to address these challenges?
Yeah, I think what has basically brought us together are actually these challenges that our people living with wildlife face in conservation. One of the key challenges is that the history of conservation in Africa is such that most protected areas, national parks, were created by moving people from their ancestral land to these new lands and then to give way and create national parks. And unfortunately, some of these historical grievances around land and resources remain unresolved. So that is one issue that is on the table as a challenge that is related to community-based conservation. Mm-hmm. Then the second challenge is about the ability for the owners of the resources, the African local communities and indigenous peoples, to benefit from these resources. Well, what we have come to know or to realize is that in the last 30 years, we have experimented or we have had policy space in terms of community-based natural resource management. But then we realize that poverty in these areas, in these IPLC areas, remains as prevalent as it was 30 years ago, meaning that CBNRM is not delivering enough benefits, enough revenues at both community and the household level. Mm-hmm. So that is a challenge number two that we think is we need to look at. Mm-hmm. And then there is also the issue of human-wildlife conflict. Across Africa, the story is the same, the cry is the same. You have got dangerous animals, mining people, killing people, destroying food stocks, destroying crops, and snatching out livestock. Unfortunately, most of our countries in Africa, except a few like Namibia, but most of them have retained the colonial laws under which there is no provision for compensation for human wildlife conflict damage. So this is yet another issue that communities, IPLCs across Africa are grappling with. Yeah, maybe let me stop here by mentioning this.
Thank you, sir. Doctor, perhaps you can talk to us about the specific initiatives or projects that have been undertaken by the Network and Alliance to support Indigenous peoples and communities in Africa.
Yeah, thank you once more. Yeah, so what you will need to appreciate is that each of our regions, like in Southern Africa, we have Community Leaders Network. In East Africa, they've got other networks. In West Africa and North Africa, in the Horn of Africa, each of these blocks of our continent, they have initiatives that they've embarked on through community-led conservation, which I think are trying to address the issues of human rights, the issues of access to natural resources, access to benefits. I think I can go on and list them. Here in Southern Africa, where we are, I think we are privileged that most of our governments have adopted community-based natural resource management processes as an approach to try and reduce some of the imbalances that IPLOCs are countering. And of course, I know human-wildlife conflict is one critical area, and I think there are interventions that are taking place in the various countries in our continent. And I think what we'll be doing during this week, during this conference, is to take stock of some of these issues that have already been raised, and of course, build a collective voice so that we can engage with our governments, we can engage with the global community on what kind of policies we need to build so that we can strengthen from what we have already been doing over the years. I think is to stop the business as usual and face the challenges that they are, so that IPLOCs and local communities can coexist, but also coexist with our governments, I think, and across the globe.
On the point of policies that you raised, are there any specific policies or advocacy initiatives that the Network and Alliance are currently working on to promote the rights and recognition of Indigenous peoples and local communities in conservation?
Yes, there are a number. I think one of the issues, there are initiatives on human rights. One of the issues on human rights, for instance, is to recognize the role and the existence of indigenous communities. Indigenous peoples and local communities. I know that in Southern Africa, we have opted to use the term marginalized communities as opposed to indigenous peoples, because I think our governments or our people want to avoid, contestations. But there are issues of rights, there are issues of access to land, there are issues of giving communities rights to generate income from the use of natural resources. Be it forestry, be it wildlife. I think these are some. Our colleagues, for instance, in East Africa, they've been advocating for land rights. They've been advocating for land rights to the pastoralist. So I think there are all these initiatives that are dotted around the continent, which the IPLOCs this week will be spending time on to engage, interact, and come up with a declaration at the end of the week.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Mr. Langa, how can individuals or organizations get involved and support the Congress's efforts in Africa?
Yeah, there are many ways that individuals, donors, and well-wishers can support the process of reclaiming IPLC rights vis-a-vis conservation. First, and maybe the most important, is that the Alliance for IPLCs across Africa is a new organization which was launched, has just been launched this year, but was conceived last year during the African Protected Areas Congress. So, one, we need the support from well-wishers, donors, our governments, to ensure that we can consolidate the African voice, African IPLC voice around the issues that we have mentioned here. So we need the resources for advocacy. We need the resources for consolidating the alliance secretariat and the governance structures. We also need the resources for outreach to our national and regional networks so that we can all pull together and confront the challenges and opportunities that we face. So these are some of the ways in which individuals and well-wishers can engage with this process.
Thank you so much. Dr. Langa, Mr. Langa and Dr. Rogers, unfortunately that's all the time we have this evening, but thank you so much for your time and thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, when we come back, we have more conversations happening here on the Daily Roundup with Nina. Stay with us.